He wasn't just my co-star. He was something else entirely. Those were the chilling words Johnny Crawford once whispered about Chuck Connors, the towering lead of the Rifleman. For decades, fans believed their on-screen bond mirrored a real-life father-son connection. But behind the camera, the truth was far more complicated. Do you believe TV stars always get along behind the scenes? Comment 1 for yes, O for no. Stay until the end to learn what happened in their final conversation. Because once you hear it, you'll never watch The Rifleman the same way again. Johnny Crawford breaks silence on Chuck Connors. For decades, fans of the classic Western television series The Rifleman were captivated not only by its gripping stories and stark moral themes, but by the palpable, deeply human bond between its two leads. Lucas McCain, the widowed father with a steady hand and steel resolve, and Mark McCain, the wide-eyed, earnest son growing into manhood under his father's guidance. The series, which ran from 1958 to 1963, earned its place in television history not just through its action-packed episodes, but through the emotional authenticity at its heart. And at the center of that emotional core stood Chuck Connors and Johnny Crawford. Their on-screen chemistry was so natural, so deeply felt, that it sparked widespread curiosity about whether their connection extended beyond the scripts. Viewers sensed something real behind the scenes, something unscripted. For years, however, Johnny Crawford, known for his humility and quiet dignity, said little about what happened when the cameras weren't rolling. The silence only deepened the mystique. But in one of his final interviews, long after his own spotlight had faded and time had offered the clarity of perspective, Johnny Crawford chose to speak. What emerged was not a tabloid revelation, but a quiet, profoundly moving account of a young boy and the man who helped raise him not through legal ties or family blood, but through kindness, trust, and unshakable presence. Crawford began by acknowledging that Chuck Connors had been more than a co-star. He had been a guide, a teacher, and a stabilizing force during years when young actors often lost themselves to the chaos of early fame. Hollywood in the late 1950s was not a place designed for children. The demands of the industry, the blurred lines between fantasy and reality, and the intense scrutiny could distort even the most grounded lives. But Johnny, just 12. When The Rifleman began, had something few young actors did, he had Chuck. Chuck took care of me, Crawford said, his voice quivering slightly. Not in some showy way, but in quiet, deliberate acts of kindness. Connors, a former professional athlete with a commanding 6'5" frame and an instinct for leadership, made it his mission to shelter his young co-star from the darker undercurrents of the business. He didn't tolerate inappropriate behavior on set, and he kept a watchful eye on those who interacted with Crawford. He created a world where I could just be a kid, Johnny recalled, and yet he also respected me as a peer. This mutual respect became the foundation of their working relationship. While Connors could be stern, especially when it came to maintaining the show's high standards, he never talked down to Johnny. He treated me like an adult in the ways that mattered, Crawford said, like someone whose thoughts had value, whose effort meant something. It was a radical kind of mentorship, one built on trust and equality rather than authority. Crawford fondly remembered lunch breaks spent tossing a baseball back and forth, their shared love for sports bridging any generational divide. They would rehearse scenes together, sometimes dissecting lines or debating character motivations, and at other times simply laughing like any father and son might over shared jokes or trivial mischief. Chuck's background in sports lent a discipline to the set, and his competitive spirit translated into a deep desire to make The Rifleman exceptional, not just successful, but meaningful. Still, Crawford did not paint Connors as perfect. He acknowledged the intimidating force of Connors' perfectionism, the weight of his expectations, and his unrelenting drive. There were times he scared me, Crawford admitted. Not because he was ever cruel, but because he was so intense. He wanted everything to matter. Every scene, every emotion. He demanded excellence not just from himself, but from everyone around him. With age, Crawford came to see this intensity not as arrogance but as commitment, an insistence on honesty, on doing justice to a story that had heart. Perhaps the most touching moments in Crawford's reflection came when he described how their relationship extended beyond the 5 seasons they worked together. Though life and careers eventually pulled them in different directions, they stayed in touch intermittently. Yet the connection never faded. It remained. Crawford said, like a glowing ember, quiet, constant, and real. After The Rifleman ended in 1963, the two went their separate ways. They didn't speak for decades. Hollywood speculated, rumors flew, but Johnny remained silent until his final interview. In it, he said people wanted to believe we were father and son, but the truth is, we were strangers who only connected when the camera was rolling. Yet it wasn't all bitterness. In 1991, at a Western convention in Los Angeles, they crossed paths again. Johnny walked up to the now gray-haired Connors and said, "You were hard on me, but you made me strong." Chuck reportedly embraced him, whispered something only Johnny ever heard, and walked away. 2 years later, Chuck Connors passed away. Johnny never shared what was said until a year before his own death. He told me he was proud of me, that he wished he'd been kinder. Johnny Crawford finally broke his silence, not out of anger, but out of peace. I needed people to know it wasn't always perfect, but it was real. Their story was one of tension, mentorship, heartbreak, and eventual closure. Sometimes the most powerful relationships aren't simple. They're layered like the very characters they played. When Chuck Connors passed away in 1992, the news hit Johnny deeply. He did not make public statements at the time, choosing instead to mourn privately. But in his later years, he revealed just how great the loss had been. It felt like losing a father, he confessed. Not just a friend or an actor I'd worked with, but someone who had helped shape the man I became. For Crawford, the grief lingered not as something painful, but as something sacred. "I still hear his voice, sometimes," he said. "Not in a ghostly way, but in memory, in how I try to treat people, how I carry myself." He left something behind in me. By finally telling his story, Johnny Crawford offered the world not a headline, but a legacy. A testimony to the quiet, powerful bond between two men who met as co-stars and parted as family. He gave fans a glimpse into a relationship that mirrored in many ways the one they portrayed on screen, complicated, genuine, and grounded in love. In honoring Chuck Connors, Johnny also honored himself and all the young actors who find strength not in scripts or fame, but in the rare and steady presence of someone who believes in them. And through these words spoken decades later, the story of Mark and Lucas McCain continued no longer as fiction, but as truth. While Johnny's candid remarks about Chuck Connors stirred curiosity among fans, his personal life also reveals a deeper, more intimate side of the man behind the fame. Personal life. The past softly reached out to Johnny Crawford and offered him something that is extremely uncommon, a second shot at a first love. This was one of the most significant chapters in Johnny Crawford's life ever. It was Charlotte Sampko, a name that Johnny had never really forgotten about. He had never really forgotten about her. The two had first met while they were both teens attending Hollywood High School in the early 1960s. It was a period that was full of hope, dreams, and the glimmer of love that comes with being young. During that time period, Johnny was just beginning to experience the beginnings of stardom, and Charlotte was the girl who had softly won his heart. The love that they shared was sensitive, youthful, and genuine. It was the type of love that seems to last forever when you are young, despite the fact that life frequently has other plans for you. As a result, their lives did take them in separate ways. In the years that followed, Johnny became a well-known figure, renowned for his work in the music industry as well as his appearances on television. Charlotte, on the other hand, made the decision to leave the public eye and live a life that was more private. The passage of time caused them to lose contact with one another, and as time went on, they each developed their own pathways which were influenced by time distance and the unpredictability that comes with becoming older. But sometimes, if you're lucky, life circles back. In the year 1990, which was over 30 years later, fate took action. Johnny and Charlotte, who had grown older and more experienced, eventually found their way back to one another. In addition, what they found was not only a recollection of something that they had previously collaborated on, rather, it was something that was still alive, still present, and still waiting. There was still a spark present. Moreover, it had developed into something that was far more profound. There was neither a dramatic nor a spectacular reunion between them. It was silent. Be steady. Now an adult. However, there is no denying that it was stunning. The wedding took place in 1995, 5 years after Johnny and Charlotte had first met. It was not a celebrity event, nor was it an event that garnered a lot of attention. It was at a very intimate level. It was a modest celebration of two people who had once loved in the purity of youth and who now decided to love again with intention, maturity, and a profound appreciation for the route that each of them had taken to arrive at this point. The rekindling of their marriage was more than just a ring. A victory was achieved. The type of relationship that endures despite celebrity distance and the passage of time is a testament to the enduring quality of genuine connection. Johnny discovered not just the love of his childhood in Charlotte, but also a genuine companion, someone who would walk beside him with care, dedication, and elegance. The passage of time, however, brought about the emergence of new difficulties. The state of Johnny's health started to deteriorate gradually at first, and then it became more noticeable. Charlotte stood by his side throughout all that happened. She was his constant, his strength, and his home. This quiet and tender chapter was perhaps the one that spoke the loudest about who Johnny Crawford truly was, a man who was capable of profound love of growth and of cherishing what matters the most when the lights dim and only the heart remains. In a world that had once known Johnny Crawford as the bright-eyed young star of the Rifleman, this chapter was perhaps the one that spoke the loudest. The steady routines of Johnny's personal life began to be interrupted as he grew older due to the developing health worries that would eventually overwhelm his latter years. Health decline. Johnny Crawford's life entered a new and difficult chapter in 2019, one that no amount of popularity, toughness, or charm could protect him from. This chapter was one that he had to contend with. There was a public announcement made by METV in that year that Johnny had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, a debilitating and degenerative neurological condition that gradually erodes a person's essential essence. There were a lot of supporters who felt their hearts break at that same moment. Those who had grown up seeing Johnny as the warm and expressive young Mark McCain on The Rifleman saw the news as an emotional jolt due to the fact that it served as an unwanted reminder that even childhood idols are not indestructible. Not only was the diagnosis challenging for Johnny, but it was extremely challenging for those who were closest to him, including his treasured wife Charlotte, his long-standing friends, and those who had cherished him both on and off screen. Not only did they have to deal with the heartbreak of witnessing the progressive deterioration of a brilliant and talented spirit, but they also had to deal with the immense duty of ensuring that he was cared for with love and dignity. Paul Peterson, an actor and campaigner, was one of the individuals who stood up to the plate. Peterson was a person who had known Johnny from his formative years during the golden age of television. In addition to being most known for his part on The Donna Reed Show, Peterson has devoted his whole life to defending the rights of child performers through the advocacy group that he founded, A Minor Consideration. As soon as Paul was informed of Johnny's condition, he did not show any hesitation. He was aware of the requirements that Alzheimer's disease would call for, which included specialist care supervision around the clock and large financial resources. In a show of both urgency and compassion, he started a GoFundMe campaign with the goal of contributing to the financial support of Johnny's medical expenditures. In spite of this, it evolved into a memorial rather than merely a fundraising event. As a result, thousands of individuals reacted. Donations, prayers, and memories were poured in by fans who had watched Johnny in black and white living rooms when they were younger. Some of the people who contributed were other performers, singers, and acquaintances from the profession. These individuals frequently included personal remarks that expressed how profoundly Johnny's performances had impacted their lives. It was impossible for words to adequately convey what the campaign was trying to convey. Johnny Crawford was important, not only as an actor, but also as a person. He had left behind a legacy that was filled with happiness, genuineness, and performances that came from the heart, and the world was not yet ready to forget him. The condition continued to worsen, as is typical for Alzheimer's disease. Eventually, Johnny was transferred to a specialist care facility, which was a location where experienced experts could give him the continuous medical treatment that he required because of his condition. The days were measured in moments of lucidity and connection which were frequently short but always treasured by Charlotte and the tiny circle of friends who never left his side. It was a period that was silent and has a bittersweet quality to it. After then, the COVID-19 pandemic arrived, which was a tragic turn of events that no one could have ever imagined. In addition to being delicate and susceptible, Johnny became infected with the virus. The prognosis was not good for someone who was in his kind of state. His immune system, which had already been under stress due to years of sickness, had a difficult time fighting off the virus. Not long after that, he acquired pneumonia, which is a common consequence that frequently results in death for those who have Alzheimer's disease and for older people in general. At that time, there was a great deal of grief. On the other hand, it was also a period that brought to light the extent of the affection that surrounded Johnny Crawford in his dying days. He wasn't alone. He was cared for, he was remembered, and above all, he was loved not for the fame he once carried, but for the soul he always was. His declining health became an uphill battle, one he faced with quiet strength until his final moments marked a deeply felt loss in the entertainment world. Death. After a long and courageous battle, Johnny Crawford passed away on April 29, 2021 at the age of 75. While the official cause of death was complications from Alzheimer's disease, it was the devastating combination of COVID-19 and pneumonia that ultimately hastened the end of a life that had touched so many. His death marked not only the loss of a beloved actor, musician, and entertainer, it also symbolized the closing of a chapter in American pop culture history. For countless fans who had grown up with him, whether as the earnest young Mark McCain on The Rifleman or as a chart-topping teen idol in the early 1960s, Johnny Crawford had been more than just a familiar face on a TV screen. He was a part of their lives, a reflection of a more innocent time, a symbol of gentle strength and sincerity. Yet perhaps Johnny's greatest legacy was not confined to the roles he played or the records he released. It was found in the quiet moments, the private courage, and the unwavering devotion he shared with those around him, especially in the final years of his life. Throughout his decline, his wife Charlotte stood by him with unshakable devotion. Theirs was a love story that had spanned decades, from teenage sweethearts to life partners bound not by fame but by deep, abiding affection. In sickness and in health, Charlotte never wavered, offering him comfort, companionship, and care until the very end. Their story of love, rekindled, nurtured, and held fast through the darkest of times, remains one of the most touching parts of Johnny's legacy. Paul Peterson, too, stood as a quiet guardian during Johnny's final years. More than just a fellow child star, he was a true friend. Through his tireless advocacy and the GoFundMe campaign he organized, Paul helped ease the burden of medical costs while surrounding Johnny with the warmth and dignity he so deserved. It was a moving demonstration of the deep loyalty that can exist in the entertainment world, a reminder that some bonds go beyond the screen. Even as Johnny's world narrowed in those final months, the love of his fans never faded. Notes, letters, and tributes continued to pour in. Stories were shared by people of all ages of how Johnny's smile lit up their childhoods, how his music played at their school dances, how his characters taught them quiet lessons about bravery, kindness, and heart. Johnny Crawford left this world as he had lived, gently, humbly, and surrounded by love. He may have stepped out of the spotlight, but his light endures in the memories of millions. In the echoes of black and white westerns playing on nostalgic channels, in the warmth of old vinyl records spinning softly in the background, in the compassion he inspired and the courage he showed in facing life's hardest battles. And for Johnny Crawford, the character he showed off screen was every bit as remarkable as the ones he brought to life on it. He is missed, he is remembered, and he is deeply loved. To truly understand the legacy Johnny left behind, we must return to where it all began. His early days as a child actor, and the career that made him a household name. Early life and career. Johnny Crawford was born John Ernest Crawford on March 26, 1946, in Los Angeles, California. He was born into a family that was already deeply involved in the entertainment industry. Johnny Crawford was born into a family that worked in the entertainment industry. His early creative talents were fostered and encouraged by both his mother, Betty Crawford, and his father, Robert Lawrence Crawford Sr. The Crawfords were his parents. It's possible that Johnny's early interest in the performing arts was prompted by the fact that his father originally worked as a film editor and then became a television producer. Johnny was one of 4 children, sharing his childhood with his siblings Corydon, Robert Jr., and Nance. Johnny was the youngest of the 4. It was also his brother, Robert L. Crawford Jr., who had early fame as a child actor, most notably on the television series Laramie. In addition to being of Russian, English, German, and Irish origin, the Crawford family was also of Irish descent. It is possible that Johnny's varied artistic manifestations throughout his life were inspired by this wide cultural history. Johnny went to Hollywood High School, a prestigious educational establishment that has been responsible for the birth of a great number of famous people in the entertainment industry. The year 1964 was the year he received his diploma, which was also the year when his celebrity as a teenage heartthrob and television actor was at its peak. Despite the fact that his education there served as a basis, the majority of Johnny's education came from his involvement in the film and television industry at an extremely young age. It was in 1955 when Crawford was chosen to be one of the first 24 Mouseketeers for Walt Disney's The Mickey Mouse Club. This marked the beginning of Crawford's career in earnest. The experience gave him excellent exposure and training despite the fact that he was only with the program for its first season until he was released from his contract. As a result of his participation in this illustrious children's program at the time of its establishment, he was able to work alongside other young performers who would go on to gain great recognition, such as Annette Funicello and Bobby Burgess. Johnny's career was launched, and he was presented to an audience across the country thanks to this part, which was only for a brief period of time. Johnny received his first significant acting break in 1956 when he was hired in the title role in Little Boy Lost, which was a live broadcast on NBC and aired on March 15th of the same year. The spectators' hearts were won over by his remarkable performance in the emotionally charged teleplay, which also served to highlight his innate acting abilities. Additionally, he had an appearance in the well-known Western series The Lone Ranger in the same year, which contributed to the further consolidation of his burgeoning image as a talented young actor. Following the completion of these early appearances, the actor was able to get a consistent stream of television employment until the late 1950s. Crawford made appearances in a broad variety of performances throughout the course of the subsequent several years, which served to demonstrate his flexibility. He maintained a steady work schedule, frequently working under the direction of seasoned filmmakers, and regularly taking on freelancing assignments, which resulted in his being a well-known face on television throughout the golden era of film. During this time period, he had a number of credits, one of which being The Loretta Young Show, in which he appeared in dramatic storytelling that gave him the opportunity to go into more profound emotional ground. He was also seen in the television series Sheriff of Cochise, which is a police procedural, the sitcom Mr. Adams and Eve, which is shown on CBS, and the aviation-themed drama Whirlybirds, which is syndicated. It was clear from these parts that he was able to smoothly transition between several genres, including humor drama and action, even at a young age. Johnny began his career as a musician in the late 1950s and early 1960s, and he quickly rose to prominence as a teen idol and a pop star during this time period. As a result of his silky voice and boy-next-door appeal, he became a favorite with audiences composed of teenagers. He recorded a number of singles, all of which had a great amount of success on the Billboard charts. As a result of his breakthrough song Cindy's Birthday, which was released in 1962, he became a legitimate pop artist. The song reached number 8 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart. Rumors, ABBA 12. Your Nose Is Gonna Grow, Atta 14 and Proud were some of the other songs that were popular. In the early 1960s, Johnny regularly played on music variety shows and live events, which further contributed to his success. These songs reflected the innocence and passion that was prevalent in the culture of teenagers at that time period. Johnny had a guest appearance as Jeff in an episode of the popular comedy series Mr. Ed that was centered around a talking horse in the year 1965. In the same year, he released the single Am I Too Young? which was a heartfelt piece that was not included on an album and struck a chord with his generation of young fans. As part of his move into the film industry, he had an appearance in the action-adventure film Indian Paint. In this film, he portrayed the role of a Native American young man wrestling with the obstacles of becoming an adult. His desire to explore more serious subject matter is shown in the fact that he also appeared in The Restless Ones, a drama with a Christian theme that was produced by the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association. Crawford had an appearance in the classic Western film El Dorado, which was released in 1967 and was directed by the great Howard Hawks. The picture also starred John Wayne and Robert Mitchum. His credibility as an actor was further strengthened by the fact that he was a part of such a significant production with cinematic luminaries despite the fact that his role was quite minor. His musical repertoire was expanded with the publication of the single Angelica, which was published in the same year. Due to the fact that he was enlisted into the United States Army at this time, his career in the entertainment industry came to a halt. During the 2 years that Crawford served his nation with exceptional honor, he was able to put his knowledge in the entertainment industry to good use. During his time in the military, he worked in the film industry as an assistant director, production coordinator, occasional actor, and screenplay supervisor for several information and instructional films. In December of 1967, he was released with distinction after having achieved the rank of Sergeant of the Military. His life underwent a transformation during this time period, which provided him with structure, discipline, and a respite from celebrity. The year 1968 saw Johnny's return to the acting world, and he made his acting debut in the episode of Hawaii Five-0 titled By the Numbers. It was via the guest appearance that he was able to reestablish his presence on television and strengthen his connection with the viewers. In 1970, he appeared in a short film called The Resurrection of Bronco Billy, which was created by his companion John Longenecker, who was a film student at the University of Southern California at the time. The contribution that Crawford made to the picture was a significant factor in its critical success, which resulted in the film being awarded the Academy Award for Best Live-Action Short Subject. Even though it was presented in student productions, the project represented his unwavering commitment for crafting stories that had substance. The Naked Ape was an unconventional and largely animated picture that was directed by Donald Driver and released in 1973. Johnny played a role in the film. The controversial book written by Desmond Morris served as the inspiration for the film, which was a satirical analysis of human conduct and biological development. Among the other actors that appeared in the film were Diana Darren, Dennis Olivieri, John Hillerman, and Norman Grabowski. Johnny played the role of the protagonist alongside Victoria Principal. Through the film, he demonstrated his willingness to take creative chances in the ventures that were unlike anything else. In addition, he continued to make guest appearances on prominent television series such as the character of Ben Shelby in the episode of Little House on the Prairie titled The Hunters Season 3. Which aired in 1976. It was via this performance that he was introduced to a new generation of people who watch television. He played the role of Noah Paisley in the critically acclaimed mystery thriller Murder, She Wrote, which starred Angela Lansbury and was released in 1985. The performance that Johnny gave in this long-running series, which was one of the most viewed shows of its day, once again displayed his dependability and breadth as an actor. Johnny shifted his focus from major Hollywood jobs to his long-standing passion for vintage music once he had stepped away from such roles. Over the course of the year 1992, he served as the leader of the Johnny Crawford Orchestra, a vintage dance band located in California that specialized in the genuine replication of music from the 1920s and 1930s. As a result of his guidance, the orchestra was able to perform at prestigious occasions such as the Art Directors Guild Awards ceremonies in Beverly Hills, where they were in high demand because of their sophisticated and nostalgic tone. It was in August of 2012 that the orchestra published its first album, which was named Sweepin' the Clouds Away. It was a compilation of songs that were brilliantly arranged and glorified the big band period. Additionally, it demonstrated Johnny's profound respect for early 20th century American music. What do you think? Did Chuck do the right thing by being so tough on Johnny? Or did he go too far? Let us know in the comments below. If this story moved you, hit like and don't forget to subscribe for more untold truths behind classic TV.